Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at something that I've kind of tried to stay away from, but I think it is time to talk about the context of the New York Islanders and the potential of trading star center Matt Barzal. We're going to take a look at that today. What's the price to acquire Matt Barzal? What are some of the suitors that have been mentioned recently? Where has he been linked to? And honestly, the reality of it, is it a feasible proposition for Lou Lamoriello and the New York Islanders? So we're going to go over that. So Matt Barzal, if you guys want some context, so the New York Islanders, right, have been a team that in 2020 and 2021 went to the Eastern Conference Finals. They missed the playoffs this year. And the Islanders are due to be very, very close to the salary cap ceiling next year. And the problem is they have one guy in particular that has to be re-signed next season, and that's Matt Barzal. Matt Barzal is coming off of the final year of a contract he signed. It was a bridge deal with the Islanders, a 3-year, $21 million contract back in 2021. And of course, the fire engine decides to go by. So he's on the final year of that contract, and there's a lot of suspicion out there that the Islanders could end up trading Barzal. So Matt Barzal is making $7 million base salary this year. But if you look at the contract overall, it was a little bit of looing going on here. $3 million in year one, $7 million in year two, and $10 million here in the final year of the contract. He also has a $1 million signing bonus that he got on January 9th of 2021 when he signed this contract. Now you look at Matt Barzal's success in the NHL. We obviously know his first season was the 2016-17 season, and that did not go so well. He played 2 games for the Islanders that season and came out of the penalty box too early and touched the puck while he was still in the box, and we know how that all went. He went back to Seattle to play with the Thunderbirds. He ended up going into his first full season with the Islanders in 2017-2018, where in 82 games he picked up 22 goals, 63 assists, and 85 points in 82 games with the New York Islanders. And if you guys remember, that's also the last season that John Tavares was with the New York Islanders. So we move along. We go into the first season of the Lou Lamoriello, Barry Trotz era, and Doug Weight was still the head coach of the Islanders at that point, that season that he played that well. And ever since then, Barzal's numbers have never gotten close to that. And again, you have to also remember that he's also played less games over that span. So that's something to remember here too. So the 2018-19 season, he still did very well. He picked up 62 points in 82 games. So his production went down. He had 23 less points in the same amount of games played. But again, this is the Islanders' new system under Barry Trotz, which prevents you from scoring goals and getting less points. Same thing in 2019-2020, but a little bit closer to his numbers. He did only pick up 60 points in that COVID bubble season, but he only played 68 games. So he got 60 points in 68 games, and he did pick up 17 points in the postseason for the Islanders on that run, the first run to the Eastern Conference Final against the Tampa Bay Lightning, 17 points in 22 games. He followed that up with a pretty solid 2020-2021 season, but again, it still leaves you wanting more. He had 45 points in 55 games with the Islanders. And again, almost a point per game in the postseason, 14 points in 19 games. So again, pretty solid numbers considering the Islanders' situation. And then this year is where we see the regression once again. In a lot of categories, his plus-minus for the first time in 3 seasons, a minus 15 with the Islanders this past year, 15 goals, 44 assists, 59 points in 73 games. So Barzal's numbers did go down drastically here this past season. The Islanders struggled. They missed the postseason. It was a rough year overall for the Islanders, and Barzal did take a hit. Now you have to assume that without Barry Trotz there, kind of not being in the doghouse, Matt Barzal is going to see more ice time and is going to see more opportunity to play his game, I think, under Lane Lambert. I think that's one of the problems that was with Barry Trotz. I know it's tough seeing Barry leave the Islanders, but he was kind of holding back Matt Barzal. And it's kind of shows in the statistics that that is a fact. That is just a proven fact. He has gotten nowhere near close to that point per game level since that first season as a rookie he had. Did it really change that much between year one and every other year after? The only difference there is John Tavares wasn't there, and of course Barry Trotz came in behind the bench after that first season. So those are the things you have to consider here. So then it comes to the question of, if the Islanders trade him, what's his value and what teams are interested in him? So value-wise, I think I'm going to go here with, you've got to throw your first-round pick in. You have to give a high-end prospect and a depth defenseman. So there's two teams that have been linked to the Islanders, the Detroit Red Wings and the Vancouver Canucks. So the Detroit Red Wings, for some reason, are in the mix. I understand that they need another center, right? They want that number one center, but you've already got Dylan Larkin, Andrew Kopp in that top six. You know, you'd have to assume in a trade, one of those guys would either have to get moved elsewhere in a 3-team trade, or they would have to trade one of those guys, Kopp or Larkin, to the Islanders. And I just don't see that happening. Unless they see a scenario where Bazry plays the wing on the Red Wings. Then maybe that does make more sense. So we're going to go with that here, that he would be playing on the wing with the Red Wings. So, with that said, what's the price? Well, you're throwing your first-round pick in 2023. I think the Red Wings would be okay with that. In terms of prospects, you know, it's kind of weird with the Red Wings because there's a couple of different guys you could look at. I like Filip Zadina there. I really like Tyler Bertuzzi. I think he fits the Islanders' style of game. But again, the Islanders already have a lot of that guy like Tyler Bertuzzi. So I like to think that the Islanders avoid Tyler Bertuzzi, but I could totally see, you know, Lou Lamoriello going that route of trying to take a Tyler Bertuzzi. But I would prefer to see Filip Zadina go to the Islanders in this trade. Maybe you find a way to get both. Depth defenseman, there's a couple of different options there. Jared McIsaac has been there. Another guy I would look at, I don't think they'd want to trade him, is Filip Hronek. Those are the kind of guys, if the Islanders are looking for a trade here, that's what you're looking at for Matt Barzal. And if you're lucky, maybe you could grab an Albert Johansson, who's a very good defensive prospect. But I think he's going to be tough to rip out of the hands of Detroit right now. So that's the Red Wings. Now, the Vancouver Canucks are also in the mix. Obviously, Barzy is from Western Canada, and he played with the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL. So where does that lie for the Islanders? So Vancouver has a couple of different pieces that I think they'd be interested in. Vasily Podkolzin, Niels Höglander are just some of those guys that I think would be cheap options for the Islanders on the wing that can score goals, put the puck in the back of the net, maybe through the net, and they have the cap space if they wanted to bring in Barzal. You also have guys on the back end I look at. Again, lesser options, but Brady Keeper is one that I look at. Jet Wu. Those are the kind of guys that you're probably looking at. And again, they're not really super high-end defensive prospects, but it's just to add behind that pool now that you're probably not seeing Andy Green and Zdeno Chara come back for the Islanders. You need to have some depth there. So that's what I think of that. I'd assume if the Canucks were interested in this trade, they'd want to trade JT Miller to the Islanders. And that's also where I'd be very concerned. I would not want JT Miller in return because the money that you'd be giving JT Miller at, say, $10.5 million, I'd rather be paying Matt Barzal at $10.5 million. That's just kind of the way this is. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. You know, I think the Islanders are in a spot where they are a little bit worried about losing Barzal next summer because cap space-wise, the only real contract that's coming off the books for the Islanders is Semyon Varlamov. His $5 million comes off the books. That's it. That's the only contract coming out of here. And the guys that they have to re-sign, they have some guys that they have to figure out renegotiations with. They have to re-sign Scott Mayfield. They have to re-sign Oliver Wahlstrom. So that's what you're looking at. And the Islanders are not going to have enough cap space for Barzal, Wahlstrom, and Mayfield all next year. Not to mention they need a backup goaltender, which depending on what Lou wants to do you go in your goalie prospect pool? You've got Kenny Appleby, who's 27 now, maybe a prospect, but you're probably looking at Jacob Skarek as your backup goaltender, and he's only 22. So at that point next year, he'll be 23, 24 years old. Maybe that does seem a little bit more of a possibility. So with that said, this is kind of a spot where the Islanders have to make some tough decisions. Do you keep Matt Barzal next year, or do you let probably Wahlstrom and Mayfield go? And I think there's a scenario where, the Islanders do let go of Mayfield and Wahlstrom in order to keep Barzal. And that's the problem with today's salary cap. And I think that's what's going to ultimately do Lou Lamoriello in. Because the problem is you're paying guys in the bottom six and guys that just don't work, you're paying them too much money. And when you look at their contracts, right, your top contracts are Anders Lee at $7 million for a very long time. Brock Nelson till 2025, he's making $6 million. Josh Bailey, $5 million. Pajot, $5 million. Palmieri, $5 million. Beauvillier, $4.15. Casey Zizekas, $2.5. Cal Clutterbuck, $1.75. Matt Martin, $1.5. And Ross Johnson is making $1.1 million. It's too much money. It's too much money, and the Islanders just don't have the cap space to make that work. And truthfully, they really only have, right now, the only two defensemen they're technically paying, depending on what happens with Dobson and Romanov, they're only paying Pulak and Pelech on the blue line. Everybody else is either Mayfield's money, which is less than 1.5, or Sebastian Aho, right? So it's going to be interesting. The Islanders have to move out salary. Lou Lamoriello has to make some trades here if he wants to keep Wahlstrom and Barzal. And if I'm the Islanders, that's my priority. Is keeping those guys. You have to keep those guys. And to be honest, I would say Mayfield is kind of a guy you really want to keep as well, because the second you lose a guy like Scott Mayfield, you're automatically looking for a guy that can play the penalty kill, like Scott Mayfield has been able to do. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of the Islanders potentially trading Matt Barzal? Again, I understand why the rumors are out there, but this is a guy the Islanders can't afford to trade, because the second you trade away a Matt Barzal, you're immediately looking for another one in return. It would be very shaky for the Islanders to make that move. Guys, let me know what you think down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.